Hey guys, my name's Khadroth, and today we're going to be talking to you about Hassan of the Shining Star, aka Shiny Hassan. I'm going to let that sink in for a second. So, Shiny Hassan, as I like to call him, is going to end up being a permanent addition to the roster. He's going to be paired alongside Marie Alter with the release of Ordeal Call 2. And he is an interesting unit, to say the least. He is an AoE arts assassin. He's a 4-star and he is weird. Definitely one of the considerations, the first thing that's going to be on everyone's mind is how does he stack up against some of our other AoE assassins, particularly the Summer Valks, as they are welfare. And so there's going to be an immediate comparison. So we're going to go through this and we're going to let you see where he's maybe better and where he's maybe not. And again, I'll let you guys decide in the end. So just going ahead and talking about his kit here right at the beginning, we can see for his stats, he starts out with 9k attack. This is not a stellar number. It is not a bad number, though. I always look at 4-stars and I say, okay, I like to see them in that 9 to 10k range. It's usually really good for them. But remember, assassins, obviously, they're not going to be the strongest attackers. So this is teetering on the edge of what I would consider to be good. It's certainly not the best, but it's not bad either. And so as a result, I'm going to say this is perfectly fine for him. He's got 11k HP, so again, a little bit not necessarily the most robust, but certainly not bad either. He is man attribute, which is rather ironic given his kit, but obviously it makes kind of sense. As you can see, he has 102 star absorption, so definitely nothing bad here. And he actually has higher than the class average star generation. Again, assassins just naturally have crazy good star generation. They actually have, I think, 5% more than any other class in the game, and really 10% more than any other class in the game prior to pretenders. So in this regard, star generation being higher than the class average, definitely good for him. And you're going to see that is actually one of the focuses of his kit. He only has a 0.27 NP charge attack rate, though, and that is not the best. But again, we're going to talk about that. It's actually not as concerning as you would think, but there is something that we definitely need to talk about with that. So looking at now his NP charge defense, he's got 4%. This is going to be the amount he receives per attack per hit. So again, anything that hits him is basically going to deal at least the 4% extra charge for him. He's got a 44% death rate. It's definitely really high, but I mean, as long as you're not taking him against something that's, really death happy, you should be good. And as an assassin, it's usually the assassins themselves that are death happy, so you're probably okay in this regard. And you can see his alignment is actually lawful evil. He is male gendered, a hominidae servant, humanoid, an actual servant, 7 Knights servant, and then weak to enemy elish. So again, they've kind of toned down a lot of the traits as we're seeing here. Not, everybody having a huge paragraph of things that you can exploit against them. You can see as well, his deck is rather weird. If you remember what I said at the very beginning, he is an AoE arts assassin, so rather odd that he actually has the triple quick deck. That being said, I think the devs looked at this and they said, like, wow, yeah, there's just not a lot of units in the game that have triple quick deck, and if there is any class that has the majority of them, it's assassin. So I think that's kind of what they tried to do, is they tried to make him just like a typical assassin. They gave him that triple quick deck, but it's definitely an oddity in an arts-based kit. But you will see they do things to actually help that out. So again, right off the rip here, we can see that he's got 6 hits on those quick cards, which is just insanely good. We already know that he had the higher than normal star generation, so he is going to be a star generating fiend in that regard. He does have the 4-hit arts cards, so even though he only has 1, it's still good hit counts, and only a 2-hit buster, which is below average. But again, if there's any card where we don't really care too much about the hit counts, it's probably buster. So at the end of the day here, he does at least have a normal extra attack, but obviously we're going to have to talk quite a bit more about this triple quick deck. Right off the bat here, you can see with his first skill, he ends up with quick and arts performance boost for 3 turns of up to 30% each. It's actually really nice because this is going to end up covering 40%, sorry, not 40%, 80% of that deck. So basically 4 out of his 5 cards are going to be getting a 30% boost. Probably not going to want to use the Buster card unless you're leading with it or doing a Mighty Chain, but obviously at the end of the day, this is still going to be really, really nice for him to have. as it's not only going to help in P generation, but also star generation and damage. And so, again, just a really, really solid steroid here for multi-turns. He does have a 20% increase to his own attack whenever he's on a darkness battlefield for 3 turns. And that is actually a new battlefield being added into the game retroactively with Shiny Hassan. That is to say, there has never been a darkness battlefield prior to this point, and now we have it added in where any node that basically has darkness in it, any node that you think this node is rather dark, either because it is just a dark place or because it is at night, will be impacted by this. So you're going to have to get used to looking for this if you use him, but obviously this is just going to be an extra increase to his damage numbers. So definitely something that is welcome. I think that is going to be one of his main niches, is using him on these types of nodes. It's just free extra 20% damage, and it's going to be really, really good for him to have that. His second skill here grants himself evasion for 2 attacks 3 turns, so he does at least have some decent survivability, and then grants himself a buff on attack for 3 turns, where whenever he attacks with a quick card, before the quick card goes out, he'll increase his critical damage by 10% for 3 turns. So really, really nice in that regard, as this will allow him to have a stacking crit buff, and it does not have a times limitation like some other units have. So basically, as long as you keep getting those quick cards if you're in a solo environment, or you end up having the ability to lock his cards in somehow, it's actually pretty nice for him, as it's just meaning that he's just going to sit there and be able to stack upwards of basically all the way up to 90%. So really a nice increase if you can manage to secure it. He's also going to increase his own critical star generation rate for 3 turns. That is not dependent on him attacking with the quick cards, just another part of the skill. And that is actually what levels up with the skill. And you can see this increases his star gen rate further by 100%. So 6 hit quick cards, 3 of them with a higher than class average, where the class is already high at generating stars. And we just boosted it by 100% more. He's going to be an insane star generator. So really, really good in that regard. His third skill here is Black Blade C+, and this is going to increase his own critical damage for 3 turns by 50%. So regardless of the stacking crit damage when you use his quick cards, he still just gets a base 50. So add that to the potential of up to 90% from that other stuff there, and man, you've got quite a bit of crit damage now for all of those quick cards. So he's going to then also grant himself a buff on attack for 3 turns, that whenever he uses a quick card, he gets 10% in P gauge. So that's just going to be really easily chainable. Think of it like Dioscuri, where obviously the arts card's going to generate for you a lot of Noble Phantasm, but sometimes the quick card might be better. And in this case, I think he makes a strong argument for using his quick cards. You're getting crit damage stacking, you are getting NP charge from it. This is a really, really nice set of skills. Obviously, when they go on cooldown, all bets are off at that point, but still, this is going to be really, really good for card performance. He's also, regardless of the proc, going to just flat out, when you press the skill, increase his own NP generation rate for 3 turns by 30%. So you are going to want to use the skill. You are going to want to level it up for looping purposes. But again, definitely a really, really nice setup for him. You can see here, he does have Presence Concealment A to increase his critical star generation rate by another 10%. And he does have Oblivion Correction B to increase that critical damage now up by another 8%. So basically 58% base, with stacking all the way up to 148% crit damage just from himself. I don't even want to think about the Scotty buffs on this guy, but still. Either way, it'd be really an interesting deck. His third append here is Anti-Assassin Attack Damage Aptitude. There is actually some synergy here for him, so you might want to consider this one. I'm not going to say that it would be the one that I would go with, because if you noticed anything about that, you should have noticed that he doesn't actually have a charge skill. He does have charge on hit from his quick cards if you're carding with him, but he doesn't have an upfront, actually usable skill to give him charge. So in that regard, mana loading is the absolute must have. And I actually do mean that if you want to loop with him, you really want that mana loading. You could definitely maybe do it without, but it would be really, really spicy to try. So I don't recommend it. Get the mana loading unlocked on him ASAP and try to use it, and it will actually really help him. Again, he does have the extra attack finesse. If you're really focused on carding with Shiny, then I actually recommend this as well, because this is going to be pretty good for him. So none of his appends are really bad. I recommend going with at least the mana loading, depending on your likeliness to use him in like neutral scenarios against something like an assassin, then maybe the third append. But otherwise, I'm going to say maybe go with the second append, then the first append, then the third append. But still, all of them can potentially be useful. Just focus on the mana loading first. Now we get to his noble phantasm. It's, of course, Zabania, as he is a Hassan, and you can see AoE wise he's got a 6-hit AoE noble phantasm. I think this is to help make up for that rather anemic NP gain rate, but again, with those kind of hit counts, you can see why they did what they did. So 6-hit AoE arts NP is not bad. He's going to increase his own damage by 20% for 3 turns, activating first. So this just stacks as you loop him. He gets even stronger in a loop. And it's also going to give him some pretty insane synergy with Oberon. He's also then going to just deal damage to all enemies and then deal super effective damage to anybody that has the man attribute. This is why I said there was some synergy with that anti-assassin skills, because you might be able to find assassins that have the man trait just like Hassan. In fact, most assassins are probably man trait. So at the end of the day, that's actually a pretty decent synergy for him. It might not be better than just straight up using a caster, but it's up to you to determine whether or not that's something you want to go after. Still, man attribute, really, really a good thing. And again, against a lot of riders, I think you'll see there are definitely plenty of man-traded riders, and certainly berserkers as well. So there is a really, really nice niche to be had here. Obviously, we have man-traded niche on units like Ezo, so having it on an AoE is not bad, especially when you start considering farming applications. Unfortunately, he does have a 500% chance to deal damage to himself as a demerit here, and that's not going to be the best scenario for him, but if you're concerned with that, maybe just put healing command codes on, especially since you probably will want to be carding with him a lot anyways. So at the end of the day, it's just up to you to determine whether or not that's something you need to offset, or just leave it be because you're just going to be farming with him. From there, you can also see his overcharge effect for 1 turn will increase both quick and arts performance by 20% each. So again, more stars generated, more NP generation, more damage. All of this just really is synergistic at adding to itself. So it's definitely a weird kit, don't get me wrong, but the proof is actually in the pudding. His kit is actually fairly good. So again, like I said, they did add the new Darkness Battlefield type. I just have to make another mention of that because there are a ton of nodes that this will be applicable for. So this will actually be pretty decent for him in the same way that Sunlight Battlefield is really good for like Barghest and Gawain. So obviously you guys need to consider this whenever you're actually needing to take someone to a node. Now, with that in mind, obviously there are some options for CEs. Something like Black Grail is definitely doable for him. But you probably want that maxed mana loading if you're going to make it happen. In that regard, if you're really concerned, maybe you're not up against 3 set enemy waves, or you don't want to take the third support, something like Ocean Flyer, definitely going to be a little bit more into your wheelhouse. And then obviously, if you end up needing something for like Invuln Pierce, yes, Honey Lake is going to be great for you, especially because of his focus on carding. So remember, Honey Lake, with it being a power mod based benefit here, means that it's not only impacting his NP, but it's also going to impact his cards as long as the target has burning. So maybe if you put some burn command codes on him, he'd be able to do it. And obviously, there are plenty of other Invuln Pierce CEs that you can go after. But again, I do think that Hassan actually has some decent performance in that regard. So let's talk about his refund. Now, remember, he doesn't actually have a charge skill in his kit, but his hit counts are all fairly good, and he does have NP gain and arts up in the kit to help him out. So if you're actually up against 3 enemy waves with double Castoria against, say, Riders, so something he would actually be effective against, you can see that basically with 3 hits of overkill out of a possible 18, That is to say, he managed to do one hit of overkill to each enemy. That is to say, he managed to kill each enemy. You would do, basically, with one hit of overkill to everything, 73% refund. And that is definitely within the acceptable range, especially if you can manage to get him charged up without maybe utilizing all of Castoria's skills. But certainly the way his charge scenario works is actually rather weird. You can actually see I do have a little bit of a graphic for this. This is something that we talk about all the time with like kind of how to break it down. I usually do like a little bit of a T chart and solve for 300 as I like to call it. But this kind of gives you an idea of the easy way that we found to do it. And this is using an Oberon as the third support. But you can see why we put such an emphasis on the append. There is 20% charge left over, but it kind of requires you to have at least the capability to split up your charge. So really, for a third support beyond Castoria, any charge that, or sorry, any support that can provide at least like 50% charge, but be able to split it up should work. So again, Oberon, Waver, Reigns, any of them should actually work as a third support for him. Might not be the best for damage if you're using one of those other options besides Oberon, but still would actually work for him. But again, it all just comes down to the timeliness and being able to actually make it work. So at the end of the day, I'm going to say he's at least restrictive with how it works. But again, he should be able to actually loop from zero, and that is the ultimate takeaway there. So if we start looking at, again, some kind of scenario with, say, neutral damage numbers, maybe in an idyllic setting here, we're going to end up with a really, really big graph. So let me go ahead and zoom in on this. This is Hassan of the Shining Star with 2 times Castoria, Oberon, a level 100 Black Grail, and a Neo Plug suit. So basically maxed out on everything there. But you can actually see wave 1 at NP1 with nothing else at play. You're looking at basically his numbers just constantly scaling and going up all the way down here to wave 3, where you end up at about 222k. If the target is man, so he gets that super effective niche, you can definitely see quite the bump up there in damage numbers at 333k. Now, the reason this is significant is for 2 reasons. One, this is not his additional NP levels. As you can see, the damage numbers get basically even more terrifying as you go down the list. And also the fact that, well, again, this does not include the darkness, and you're also going to be comparing them to the Valkyries, a 4-star welfare. So with that in mind, if we actually go ahead and pull up the Valkyries in a idyllic scenario for them, you can see they're assumed to be NP5 here. And with that assumption, at wave 3, you're looking at 291. Anti-Earth, it's a lot better. They start dealing a ton more damage. So at the end of the day, that 291, though, is basically immediately beaten by NP2. The 400 and I believe it was 80. Yeah, 480 from Anti-Earth with the Valks, though, is not enough basically to win at NP2, though, with Anti-Man for him. In Niche, instead, you're going to need NP3 at that point to beat him. That's just due to some really nice synergy in the Valks end. And at the end of the day, it's not a bad thing for him. But the thing that's important about this is, yeah, just basically NP2 of this would already beat the Valkyries. And the reality with this is that, again, this didn't include his darkness numbers. So if we actually pull that one up on top of that, you can see this is now just basically darkness field. It's the same scenario as before for Shiny Hassan, just we added a darkness field to it. So all the numbers just go up with that additional 20% attack. So right there, boom, immediately you can see NP2 just flat out wins. And basically NP1 is now giving it a run for its money at 250 base with 375 anti-man there in that final one. So again, not too much worse than the Valkyries. But I think the benefit to the Valkyries here is that they're just a little bit more loopable. That is to say, they have a very easy time refunding to full, even with just double Castoria in some scenarios. So yeah, I think this is going to be the big argument for him is, do you need him if you have the Valkyries? And if you don't have the Valkyries, how long will it take you to get the Valkyries? But he still has that anti-man niche, and that's something that the Valkyries can't do. So he does give you some more coverage. Thing at play here is there's also another contender for the AoE Arts Assassin niche. And we're not talking about shooting. Shooting can work in some scenarios, but she kind of needs some love at this point in time. And I'm going to say that where a lot of people are going to focus instead is on Tezcatlipoca, aka Tez, or Woo, if you like to call him that. Woo, basically, with 2x Castoria Oberon and level 100 Black Grail with a Neo Plug suit, definitely manages to make some headway here at NP1. His NP1 raw numbers just win against everybody. But basically, his power mods do not scale as well as the super effective mods from the other units. The hilarious part about this is he's anti-divine and anti-super large, so he can actually double stack the power mods. But the second we start talking NP2 onward, yeah, Tez just going to win. So again, I'm going to say that at the end of the day, Shiny Hassan is actually a pretty good unit. He is permanent. He is a unit that basically people will be able to be spooked by. So I'm not going to say you necessarily need to roll specifically for him, but he is a nice treat to be added to that Marie banner. So if you do manage to pick him up, please understand that even at low NP levels, he can actually be more effective, basically, than, say, the welfares that are out there. You do probably want to get him in niche, but he is definitely usable. So let me know what you guys think about Shiny Hassan and whether or not you'll be going after him. And do you see yourself rolling on that banner or maybe waiting for a better banner if you maybe don't like the pairing there? Again, I'll be curious to hear you guys' thoughts, and I will see you guys for the next one.